Joining me now, Ben Stein, Gianno, Caldwell, Leah, Wright, Rigueur, and Betsy McCaughey. She's the newest member of Donald Trump's Economic Advisory Council. Ben Stein, let me go to you first. We're talking about dueling economic plans. Both presidential candidates have laid it out there for the American people. What do you think?
Well, I don't think Mr. Trump's plan is going to work very well. I don't think we need to have tax cuts when we're running deficits the size that we're running. I think the evidence that tax cuts stimulate business in any kind of meaningful way, at least not sufficient to overcome the tax revenue loss, is extremely poor, to put it mildly. I think the idea of cutting taxes on the rich at a time when there's so much concern about inequality is not a good idea. I do think his idea of greatly lessening environmental regulation is absolutely necessary and even brilliant and very brave of him.
Betsy?
Well, I'd like to respond. First of all, Donald Trump's tax plan will produce an enormous increase in economic growth. The key factor is slashing the corporate tax rate, currently the highest in the world, down to 15%. Companies in the United States are being taxed to death, and that's why so many of them are leaving or retrenching their business investment. 3 quarters in a row now, business investment has declined, literally pushing us toward the brink of a business recession. Slashing the corporate tax rate will reverse that. And let me just point out, in response to Ben's comments about the poor and tax reduction for the rich, slashing the corporate tax rate and producing growth will benefit the poor the most. Under Barack Obama, poverty has increased so substantially, 8 million more people living under poverty than when he became president.
You know, Gianno, let me go to you on that because, you know, it's one thing, Donald Trump, obviously, every income bracket gets a tax break, and consequently will have more money in their pocket. But Hillary quickly pointing that this means millionaires will be pocketing hundreds of thousands of dollars more, while someone in the middle class may get $2 or $3 grand. And that's the politics of envy that's won the last 2 presidential elections.
And you're right about that, Charles. I'll tell you, the Bible tells us a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Hillary Clinton's plan disallows that, which I think is biblically immoral. Her raising the threshold for those who, what we call the death tax, estate tax, for those who might have earned investments, they might have left some money for their families. Now there's a threshold of $3 million versus the $5 million, which used to be non-taxable. Now there's going to be a rate raise on that. In addition to that fact, Hillary's plan has been pretty much status quo. Raise the taxes on the rich, as you just mentioned, and demonize those who have worked hard for what they have. Donald Trump offers something a whole lot different. Besides the fact that he is slashing the corporate rate hike, he's also providing for not health care, but those who have children at child. There you go, child care. I think that providing that deduction is going to be helpful to a lot of folks.
Leah, you know, this gets us back to the debate of whether trickle-down economics really work. We saw, you know, under Ronald Reagan, 3.5% on average, 4.5% for the last 6 years he was in office. Nevertheless, it is, you throw it out there and a lot of people, they cower. They say, oh, they remember that, and they don't remember it fondly for some reason.
Well, I think the problem with both candidates, right, that we have to think about is that we really don't know how their policies will affect the poor, right? So nobody's really speaking to the needs of the poor. They're trying to kind of touch around and couch around ideas and rhetoric of the middle class.
Well, let me just ask you. I'm going to let you finish your thought, but let me just ask you, Leah, if the same tide lifts all ships, wouldn't that include the poor?
You would think, but, you know, history has shown us that that doesn't include the poor. And I just want to point out for a second, Charles, you know, there's been a lot of attention to the poor, but there's been almost no attention to kind of who makes up the poor, right? So the poor is disproportionately racial minorities. And we haven't seen anything from either candidate, but especially and particularly Donald Trump, on issues that direcely affect these people.
I disagree with that.
Let me hold on one second, guys. I got to go. We start talking history. I got to go back to Ben Stein. He's our resident historian. He's been there, done that. What do you make of that, Ben? People dismissing the idea that if the economy rises, it should bring everyone along with it.
Well, a rising tide lifts all boats, but it does not lift those boats which are underwater. And if I may say to our friend, the Lieutenant Governor, there simply is no evidence that slashing the corporate tax rate produces growth. There's a lot of allegations that does. There is no... Did you say that's ridiculous?
I said that's ridiculous.
I'm the one who studied this. I'm not a... Well, with all due respect, I'm the one who studied it. You're the politician. You can say whatever you want as a politician.
No, I have a
is no
PhD in
evidence of
history.
that.
Okay, well, let him finish, and then you can
With
throw
all
it in
due
there.
respect, there is no evidence of that.
All right, Betsy.
Well, there
no
is, and in
evidence of
fact,
that.
if you look at countries around the world that have slashed their corporate tax rates, Ireland, for example, which was having extreme economic difficulties, last year Ireland grew at 7.8%, while under the 7.5 years of the Obama recovery, growth is lingered along at maybe 2%. It's outrageous how poor it's been, and the corporate tax rate is a major reason.
Ben, beyond the argument
You
over...
don't know that. You have no idea of that. You have no idea of that. I mean, you can say it, but there's never been any data connecting those two.
Of course there is.
And you can say whatever you
Take
want.
a look at other countries that have lowered their corporate tax
There
rates.
is no data connecting. There are
Yes,
a million
there is.
other
Take
things
a look
going
at
on in those
Canada.
other countries. Ireland had a major financial collapse, and then its banks were shored up. That's why it recovered. It wasn't because of a change in the corporate tax rates.